Hey Dave, how are you?
Hey Sal, I'm doing well. How are you doing? Nice to
I'm
see
good.
you.
Nice to see you as well. So yeah, this is exciting. We're going to be doing a talk on anxiety. A lot of people these days, I'm sure, are going through a lot of mental health challenges. And, Dave and I thought that, this would be good for people to hear some strategies that we use to help clients get through tough times and yeah, their mental health struggles. This will be the first part of a two-part episode or podcast. And in the first one, we're going to be talking about anxiety. And in the second part, we're going to be talking about depression. Um, Dave, so you want to tell everyone how you and I met?
Yeah, Sal and I have known each other for, I don't know, when did you start at the same club?
We started working together in 2011.
2011. Yeah, so we've
Yeah,
known each other for 10 years now. And
yeah,
so we're we've been in the fitness and health and wellness industry, myself for 20 years now.
mhm,
And yeah, so I mean, our philosophies align quite a bit. We definitely both take a sort of a well-rounded, holistic approach to health and exercise and nutrition and mental health and the mind game and the spirituality. So we definitely have some very aligning philosophies.
yeah,
So I think there's some really good synergy here. But yeah, so
yeah.
yeah, I
Look
don't know if you
forward
want to
to
tell.
I really do look forward to this. Yeah, every time Dave and I would have discussions on anything, we always seem to exactly be very synergistic with our thoughts, and that's because we both do think holistically. We look at the person from a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual uh, aspect. And yeah, whenever you do that, uh, it's very, I find it rewarding when you talk to someone who sees eye to eye like that, because it's not a narrow minded approach where sometimes you can be closed minded with certain things. And I really like talking to Dave because, pretty much anything is open to discussion without any judgment. So with that being said, let's get started. How would you, you know, first of all, define anxiety?
Yeah, so I mean, anxiety is how I would define it. I mean, is definitely a fear-based response. So it's a certain sort of quality of fear that people have that exhibits and manifests in certain symptoms in the body. It could be really tight muscles, or shortness of breath, or tight breathing, or sort of numbness and tingling in the hands, or
Mhm.
it can really disrupt your sleep patterns a lot. So it's sort of when fear builds up in your body, in your mind, to the point where it's manifesting in physical symptoms or sensations, and they can be quite unnerving. And in the end, it makes participating in life very difficult, and very uncomfortable, and sort of contributes to sort of a pattern of sort of avoiding life,
Mhm.
and staying away from scenarios and situations, um, that can a person can perceive to be very difficult, but the anxiety rises up and controls and takes over, and
Mhm.
then you don't have any control over your actions or thoughts anymore, and now you are at the mercy of your anxiety. So it is a fear response. Uh, it is typically generated for thoughts about future scenarios. It's not always, but it's most of the time. It's you're thinking about things that may happen or might happen, or if you're thinking about a scenario that's coming up in your life and you don't know how to deal with it. But it's typically things that are not always 100% within your present moment. Um, when there's fear in the present moment, that is more fear than anxiety, I would say. Like if someone pulls out a gun on you,
Mhm.
that's fear, that's not anxiety.
Mhm.
There's something happening that's a
Because
threat to your.
yeah, that's an actual real thing happening in the present moment. It's not something that's projected and happening in the mind. Am I
Right,
correct?
correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And so in that scenario, fear is there as sort of a protective mechanism uh,
Hmm.
to help you. But in terms of anxiety, people get generalized anxiety, about different life scenarios and different triggers for different people. But then, yeah, a lot of it is projected onto what you think may happen. And the
Hmm.
more that builds up in your system and charges in your body, the more uncomfortable the sensations get, and until it can just completely overwhelm you.
Hmm.
Um,
And that
yeah,
and yeah, and that leads to limiting the way you express yourself, right? And yeah, definitely is gonna affect you from living your life to the fullest and really enjoying life. So it could be quite debilitating.
it
Yeah,
can. Yeah.
yeah. No, I totally agree with you. That's a really good definition. Um, now, you know, you yourself, do you have like any instances where you suffered from anxiety and struggled with it, and really, what have you done to sort of handle it when it comes your way, or what have you done in the past to sort of overcome your own personal struggles with anxiety?
Right. So yeah, I had anxiety for about 10 years that I knew of, probably longer that I didn't know of because I was just not self aware enough. I would always avoid situations or be afraid of situations and keep away, but I wouldn't have known that it was anxiety at the time. But
Mhm,
at some point, my anxiety did get really, really bad to the point where I was having panic attacks.
mhm,
And so that this was probably maybe 2000. The worst of it, I would say, was 2005 through 2013,
mhm,
probably in that range. Sort of that 8 year period was the worst of it. But yeah, I got to the point where I was having panic attacks. Um, if I was just home by myself, the anxiety would just well up, and then I would just start crying into a pillow or screaming into a pillow so my neighbors wouldn't hear me, and I would just be like, what the fuck's going on? Excuse my
mhm,
language. what
mhm.
what is this? Like, I have no idea. And it wasn't until it got that bad that I really, really questioned, why is this happening, and what's going on here. So
Now
I did.
sorry, I don't mean to, now you said you put your head in a pillow and screamed, um, so no one would hear you. Does that mean that you sort of didn't share this with anyone? Did you like bear this struggle on your own, or you just mean like you didn't want anyone outside of maybe some close friends or family that did know to hear you, or again, was it something you uh, took on completely solo?
Yeah, no, I have sort of a lone wolf mentality, uh,
Mhm,
and uh, and I'm also, I would say, I was not comfortable discussing it with anyone. I think there's a secondary aspect to any sort of mental health struggle. It is just the not having the strength to be vulnerable
mhm,
with how I was really feeling around other people,
mhm,
either for fear of judgment or whatever reason. But yeah, I did not share or talk about it with anyone, and it really affected not only just my general life quality, but my relationships with people as well. Because then, when you're in that state, you just distance yourself and wall yourself off from everybody, right? Because you don't want them to see how you are or how you're behaving, or in my case, maybe that I was experiencing weakness, or however I wanted to define it at the time. Yeah, so no, I didn't really share it with anybody. And it wasn't really until later that I really even started opening up about it to my wife or my family, right?
mhm,
I mean, I have mentioned it to my friends in passing, but not even really in even great detail.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, no, there's definitely there's a part of you that just closes off and walls off, but that just makes it worse. Right?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's, I went through something similar with my depression, which we'll talk about in part two, but as
Yeah.
males, um, in our era, even more so than today, I think we sort of, as guys, talk more about superficial things like sports and so on and so on, and not so
Yeah.
much shared our feelings with one another. Whereas I think, you know, uh, that was happening maybe more with girls. They would talk more about how they felt, whereas with us, we, like you said, we were more like lone wolves, and we wanted to project strength and that we were strong, and so uh, yeah, you could also even develop an anxiety of people figuring out that you are weak and that you are struggling.
Right.
So, because again, that makes you a weak male, and that's the last thing that I know for myself that I wanted to share with others. And yeah, definitely not comfortable doing that, because then you'd be made fun of or picked on, or whatever it is. Again, these are just projected worries, because it would happen. I mean, it would happen when someone was different in any way. They were picked on in school. That was our era.
Right.
Yeah, that happened on a daily basis. So I think that did contribute as well. But
Yeah.
sorry, yeah, go on.
Yeah.
uh,
Or just the
with what
suck
you
it
were
up
saying.
buttercup kind of mentality,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Um, okay, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. Um, the other thing I want to say is, in 2017, 284 million people suffered from anxiety globally, making it the top mental health disorder. In your opinion, why do you think that is? Why do you think anxiety is the top mental health disorder in the world? And it's probably worse today, I would imagine, with this pandemic and people locked up and cooped up in their homes. Yeah, so again, yeah, why do you think it's the case that anxiety is number one?
yeah. I mean, I think part of that number, and I do think it's bigger than that number states.
Mhm.
Part of that number, I think, though, is that we are a little more aware of it than we used to be. So I think maybe the numbers were high in the past, but people were just not talking about it. So
Yeah,
the number might have appeared smaller just because it was just swept under the rug or whatever, right?
yeah, just like we talked about, people are not willing to share their struggles. The mental health is something that is only they just started talking about mental health recently. When I was
Yeah,
growing up, you and I were growing up, they didn't really talk about it. It wasn't
yeah,
something that people discussed.
yeah. So I think there's a few things there. I think part of it is just how society is structured and how it works and how we operate within that society. And what I mean is, uh, even though it's sort of like a paradox, even though we have the internet that connects us in a way that we've never been connected before, it also disconnects us in a way that we've never really been disconnected before.
Yes.
And face-to-face human contact and in-person contact and having just someone around to give you a hug or have a face-to-face conversation, I think that human connection aspect, uh, I think we're losing it as a society, and
Mhm.
that isolates people and it makes them feel alone and by themselves. And the more that, and I mean, this is just where society is going, the greater as technology builds and we come more and more into our own bubble and universe, become more disconnected with people. And I think that just that in itself creates anxiety. And part of
Mhm.
the technology part of it is that information travels so fast now.
Mhm.
When something happens in some part of the world, we know about it like within minutes.
Mhm.
And it goes to the media and the news outlets and Facebook and all of social media that how they want to make their money is by triggering you.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of what you're going to see are things on the media that triggers you. And part of that trigger is to initiate a fear response. Here's a horrible story. How many, I don't know if you were ever told that story when you were a kid, that about, what is it, Chicken Little and the sky is falling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like we live in a society today where we are constantly bombarded with messages that the sky is falling.
Mm-hmm.
And that, for people who are not sort of centered or strong or able to apply a filter to that message, I think, just impresses upon people over and over and over again, until you walk around and you see that in every situation in front of you. So I think a lot of it is exposure and how the environment is that we are structured in. um, and yeah, I think that's sort of like an overall,
Yes.
sort of general, sort of big contributing factor. um,
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, fear is definitely a motivator. So if companies can use it as a strategy to sell their products and services, they're going to use it just like they use, uh, sex or whatever, narcissistic type ads,
yeah,
right? That yeah, whatever they can to get people to buy their products and services. I also think you touched upon the social media aspect, and a lot of people are viewing these bubbles, as you called them, and a lot of these bubbles aren't the whole picture. You're only seeing the surface. So uh, we have this. A lot of people I find do this. We project what we think other people have that we don't, right? So we see people, posting their best pictures. It could be them on vacation, them whatever it is, having a great time, and we think, oh, they're happy and I'm not. Meanwhile, we don't know what else is going on in their life, right?
right,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's sort of the big picture perspective, but if we narrow it down to sort of the individual
Mhm.
and what goes on there, just in general, I still don't think by and large people are taught how to cope with their emotions
Mhm.
and with stress from a very young age. I don't remember being taught that at all
No.
from parents or from the environment that I was in, and it was something that I had to figure out by myself. And fortunately,
Mhm.
there was enough information out there that I could sort of muscle my way through that, and figure that out. But it's just, in general, we're still very intellectually based.
Yeah.
We worship the mind and the intellect,
Yes.
uh, and not that that's not important, but we are also emotional beings. And I think for the large part, we just were not taught how to manage or cope with a very essential part of our nature and our being.
Mhm.
And so when stuff like that comes up, people just don't have the skills or the tools to handle and deal, right?
Yes. Yeah, I remember, when I um, after I finished high school, for the first time, I picked up a nutrition book, and it was just mind blowing. I was like, I didn't learn simple things like hydration, or, that your body needs certain vital nutrients or anything like that.
Right.
And at that point, that was sort of a revelation for me, saying, oh, how much did I not learn in school?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was sort of one of the enlightening phases in my life where I was like, wow, okay, I realized that it's up to me really to educate myself and start looking into how much it is that I wasn't taught, and I need to learn and know. And yeah, definitely going through my all my schooling years with depression, I definitely felt how the school system, failed me, because that was something we never discussed in those years growing up. So yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, that's good. That's really good. I'm great. I'm glad you shared all that. The next thing I wanted to ask you is, you know, you, is there a root cause for anxiety, or is the cause unique to each individual?
Right.
Or
So I'm
both,
gonna,
right? Or is there a bit of both, right? Like it
yeah,
could be a combination.
yeah. There's a bit of both, I would say for sure. I think there's a mental component to it. I think there is what I'm going to call an empathic component to it, which I'll talk about in a minute. There
Hmm.
definitely is a physical component to it, and I think there's also just part of it is just a learned behavior as well.
Hmm.
Um, so let's start with the mental part of it, as we talked about earlier. Is there is a fear response that happens in the body, and first in the mind, but sort of when the mind just winds up and focuses on something over and over and over again, and a thought repeats over and over again, that sort of generates a charge in your body, which is your emotion, which are your emotions, right? And but even though the thoughts generated in the mind, emotions are generally held and stored within your body, and that's what causes the physical manifestation of the symptoms of the tightness in the chest or the difficulty breathing or the hands shaking or whatever. That's just
Hmm.
emotional energy that's running coursing through your system.
Hmm.
um, and so that's sort of the mental cause of it, and to get that you have to sort of root into your mind a little bit and see what thoughts are causing that. I want to say for some people there's an empathic anxiety, and this is not something that we could say maybe is clinically diagnosable. It's maybe not as acceptable, but in my own experience, it's been true. We feel what other people feel.
Hmm.
Some people don't, and they're called psychopaths or sociopaths. But in
Hmm.
general, most humans have the ability to tune in to what
Hmm.
other people feel. And I think there's a few that are very, very sensitive to that. It is a special gift that they have.
Hmm.
And if they're not taught or told that, then that gift can overwhelm them. And you can walk into an environment and be totally overwhelmed by the energies of that environment. And
Yeah, and become a curse. It could
yeah,
become a curse, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think because they're, especially like in a pandemic,
Hmm.
if someone doesn't have anxiety in general, but they're one of these empathic people, they just tune in to what's going on all around them and they're surrounded by this. I think that's a separate cause than having your own thoughts generate your own anxiety. I think people can just tune into the collective and the fear of the collective and everybody around
Yes.
them, and it can just bury them if they don't know how to establish separate boundaries. So, again, that's not a clinically diagnosable one. And again, I should mention I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
uh, I can't clinically diagnose, and this information is not intended to diagnose. I'm just talking about my own experiences here.
Yes.
uh, Physical, we do know certain nutrient deficiencies can contribute. Vitamin B12 is a big one.
Hmm.
People who, even if you look at symptoms of low B12, you'll see anxiety come right with that.
Hmm.
Um, so anything to do with the nervous system, which is B vitamins, B12, low magnesium. People that have
Yeah.
really low magnesium can be really prone to anxiety because magnesium and calcium, they're both very calming minerals. So certain nutrient deficiencies or low grade deficiencies can contribute to that state of being, and they can the symptoms originate in your body through your nervous system
Hmm.
through the nutrient deficiencies. And if you're not getting enough B12, which I know when I had my anxiety, part of that was because I was getting low B12 on my blood tests. That was a part of it. And so I could connect the dots there. But when you give your nervous system, when you don't give your nervous system the right, nutrition, it can start to get really fired up and wound up, and it can just charge your body up, and you can just be like, hands shaking, hyper all the time, and that can be sort of a cause or another contributing factor. And then, like I said, I think learned behavior. I think kids that are very young, they're sponges. They just see, and they, monkey see, monkey do. That's how they learn and how they absorb information. And I think if they're around a lot of other people that are anxious or exhibit that type of behavior, they can just pick it up and learn, and
Hmm.
and just think, oh, this is just how it's supposed to be. This is my normal. This is the normal response to that situation, and they don't know any better.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think there's part of it could for some people be a learned. Um, but either way, that imprint then still goes back to it will still create their own thoughts about fearful responses to scenarios that they will still have to manage. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think causes are different. There's similarities. I still think the whole picture has to be taken into account. Um, whether it's the nutritional component or the mental game, I think you still have to come at it from both. I don't think you can just isolate one and say it's all this or it's all this. Again, for me, it's always looking at the whole picture,
Yes.
to see what's going on. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Um, Sort of leads into the next question, and you may have, answered it, to a certain extent. But are there certain triggers, and what are they like that will, make you like you may have a bit of anxiety, but like take it to the next level, right? Are there certain triggers that you should look out for if you do struggle with anxiety? And like what are the things that the way I would ask is, how can you be mindful and so the next time you come across, oh, whoa, be careful, that may you know, take me to that, extreme point with my anxiety. So I have to make sure that I avoid it or do
Yeah.
the right thing to basically, handle it better or whatnot.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of triggers, everyone's going to have their own separate trigger,
Hmm.
to the point where you then get generalized anxiety disorder where everything is a trigger.
Yeah. Oh,
Because some people get to that point where
yes.
all of they have so much anxiety that all of life is a trigger. Going outside is a trigger. Going to the store is a trigger. Talking with your mom on the phone is a trigger. Like
Okay.
everything.
Yeah.
So there, for some people, I guess to that point where everything's a trigger. But in individual situations, it's different. I mean, for some people, I mean, I know there's general classifications. I don't know all of them, but for some people, I know social anxiety,
Hmm.
just being in social situations can be a trigger. I know for some people, work is going to be a very big trigger.
Hmm.
And then just like interpersonal relationships can be a very big trigger. There can be just some people, when you're going to be in a room with that person for whatever reason.
Hmm.
I mean, I guess that might go back to social, but this is very specific to like a person in a specific relationship. So there's broad categories, and then there's the generalized anxiety disorder. But in terms of, I guess that leads into the first step is just becoming aware of what your triggers are, right? I mean, you can't really fix something. I don't want to even say fix something. You can't really manage it until you're aware it's there. And that was part of my problem, is I was not aware of it until it got to panic attacks,
Yeah.
and everything that happened that was leading up to that. I was just clueless.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, yeah, building self-awareness is key. And I guess we're going to talk about that in a bit with strategies.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, I'll get to that very soon. Um, Now, it is there. If the one fact that actually caught me off guard was that women are twice as uh, likely to struggle with anxiety or be affected with anxiety than men. Why do you think that is?
yeah. Um, I think in general, so I'll give you an example of someone who I know, who once told me a story about how she was chased down by men one night on a city street.
Hmm.
And whenever she walks around, she always has to look over her shoulder. And when I've that would never, to me as a male, I would never occur that if I were walking down the street, that I would just have to always look over my shoulder to see if someone's coming out to get me or something like that. But I think just in general, women have been treated pretty poorly uh, due to their sex, by males and society due to their sex, for sure. And I think that second class or being treated as less than, and even abuse, I think leads to something that a lot of women just carry around with them all the time. And I mean, it's also harder for women. They've had to fight a lot for equal rights over the years, and so
Mhm.
not being treated the same in the workplace, not being able to get jobs or being equal pay. Like there's a lot of struggles that women go through that men do not go through. And that sum total of struggle just adds to the burden that they're
Mhm.
carrying um, as a woman. So I think there's just a lot more to it there than, and maybe as men, we just can't really recognize that, or not even recognize, but understand that, just because we haven't been in those situations, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think there's, I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my head. If there's anything else you want to add, you can jump in there for sure.
Um, yeah, I would agree with you. I think, and I would agree with the stats. I don't know if it would be double. It could also be, um, and I may be wrong. It's just sort of a thought. My theory may also be, again, men just not willing to share or be
Yeah,
vulnerable. Uh, and yeah, so that could affect the numbers. Um, so yeah, I don't know. That's probably the only thing I would add is that women, are more willing and open to talk about their emotions. I find even just with my clients, and whereas again, yeah, men just have this more reserved nature, and they tend to, yeah, hold things in and try to tough it out, or whatever it is, go at it alone. And yeah, things are changing, but that may contribute to the lopsided numbers, because I know I just can't see, because once, you and I are very non-judgmental, and we're great coaches, and we've learned to break down the barriers over the years with people. And once I start getting comfortable with some of my male clients, they really do start to share their struggles, because I start first and tell them what I went through, and then once I do
right,
that, it's kind of disarming for them, and then they realize, oh, okay, this guy's not gonna poke fun or jab at me or whatever it is, and then they start to just relax and say, you know what, I have this struggle, and then they start confiding in me. And then it's like, but if it was a questionnaire that they were filling out randomly, they probably would say, yeah, I'm fine, right? Whereas they have a
right,
lot of a lot of problems they're dealing with that are buried underneath whatever walls that they've put up around them. Yeah, that's the only thing I would add. But yeah,
yeah,
great points about definitely women have to deal with a lot more fear than men. I totally agree with that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, even collectively, like you were talking about being empathic. Just you feel that, I'm sure, even when a woman hears about it happening to another woman, that story about walking down the street, then they're going to feel that person's fear as well, because they
right,
know
yeah,
it could happen to them, or it could happen to um, one of their friends, or whoever, right? And that just, yeah, it definitely would trigger a fear or anxiety type response. Yeah. Now, yeah, we were talking about strategies. What are your top strategies for um, let's start with like a short bout of anxiety. So let's just say you're having a panic attack, and you need to do something immediate. Like, what's the best thing to do? What are your top strategies for that? And then in the second part, we'll get into more long term, and trying to heal from it, or create some sort of bulletproofing for it, right? Where
yeah, yeah,
it you sort of nip it in the butt before it builds up to that point where it becomes an extreme panic attack.
right, yeah.
Hmm.
So the strategy, I guess, depends on the level that you're feeling, because the thing is, by the time you're getting up to the point where you're having a panic attack, there's no stopping it. And if you try to, it's actually not beneficial. I mean, it's helpful if you look at this as energy that has to be expressed.
Okay.
Like if you have something that's within you that has to come out. Like
Hmm.
we know if someone's in grief, they've got to cry because they've got to express that. If someone gets really angry, they've got to yell and scream because that energy has to be released from the body. And so when you have a panic attack, the strategy there is not to think that anything is wrong with you or that you're broken
Hmm.
or something, or that, because I mean, how you label what happens is a very strong determining factor about how you progress along your path. And if
Hmm.
you go in this with judgment, thinking that something is really wrong with you, and that you're so inherently wrong that you have to be fixed, that puts you sort of in a very disempowered place. And
Hmm.
so if you just look at a panic attack as just energy that has to be expressed from the body, and this is the body's natural way of discharging all of that excess energy.
Hmm.
And so when the panic attack comes, you just have to let it happen and write it out.
Hmm.
And then afterwards, that's when different strategies come into play. But with the panic attack itself, yeah, just you just kind of got to write it out and let it happen. I think suppressing it actually makes it worse in the long run.
Hmm.
Um, Unfortunately, there's some social barriers towards expressing that. Um, but even if, like when I had them myself, most of the time I was in the privacy of my own home, and I could get that out, and that was my way of releasing that. But just in general, I would say uh, the simple thing to tell yourself is to breathe it out or to burn it off.
Hmm.
To keep it really simple. And when there's sort of like a level of hesitation or doubt, if you don't face it or deal with it at that point, it continues to magnify and turns into restlessness or anxiety. And if you don't deal with it at that point, then that's when it builds up to like a panic attack. So depending on where the spectrum you are, if you're at the point where it's anxiety, you're going to have some symptoms. Your heart rate's probably elevated, your adrenaline and cortisol levels are probably elevated, and your body's probably really tense, maybe shaking. um, those are the same things that would happen during exercise.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
so when you have this excess energy build up in your body, when you're at sort of the borderline between anxiety but before panic, the best thing to do is move your body. And this is how you discharge the excess energy. And this is I think where I was really fortunate, because I had always had a background in exercise, and I always had that body awareness of when I just had to move.
Hmm.
And so one of the strategies that I used, and I still use it all the time now, and I love it, was just to go hiking, right? I would just have all of this energy built up in my system, and I would just go on a hike. And nature is a really good tool for this because it helps settle you down. But even if you can't go for somewhere for a hike, just go for a walk and just walk it off, like move your body. And that helps discharge the energy. And you just do that, and eventually it passes and you might feel a little bit better. It's not going to be sort of it's not going to cure you instantly, but it's a strategy that you can use in the moment
Hmm.
to sort of regulate what's happening. And the key is that if you are choosing to walk or hike or do some type of movement, the key is that it's your choice.
Hmm.
Right? You're taking power over the anxiety and saying, no, I'm not going to let that anxiety make my decision for me and make me go, hide under my covers or whatever, or just avoid. You're actually choosing to do something and not letting that anxiety, control you. So when you're in that anxiety state, movement is probably one of the best things that you could do. I am going to qualify that though. Very high intensity movement, at least in my experience, only ever made things worse.
Hmm.
And so when back at a time where we were working at the gym, the same, health club, there were times when I would try some high intensity workouts and I would feel a trigger coming on. The
Yeah.
shallow rapid breathing is a trigger, and you can get that through some type of exercise. And then I have to bolt and go into the bathroom in the back
Yeah.
and try and settle myself down because the high intensity exercise was a trigger. So
Yeah, you
I
get
went,
those heart palpitations and all kinds of that tightness in your chest. I mean, if
yeah,
you're exerting yourself, that's definitely going to make it worse. So yeah,
yeah,
light exercise is definitely the key there. Yeah.
yeah. So light exercise, like lower intensity but longer duration, because it took a while to burn off some of that excess energy, or even yin type exercises like yoga or stretching,
Hmm.
like things like that, because there's so much tension that builds up in the body. those types of exercises help kind of release that energy from your system and get it out. So the exercise, I think, at a certain point is good, provided you're not overdoing it. And then once if you can develop enough self-awareness to strategize and sort of not strategize, but become aware of when the early onset of the symptoms are before they build out of control, like when you're just at doubt or hesitation, you're just a little fidgety, maybe you've got a little butterflies in your stomach, maybe you notice your hand tapping or your foot tapping, like those low grade early symptoms that are showing you that something's going on in your head that you've got to deal with. That is a really good time to do breathing exercises. And I found that breathing really helped. There's a strong connection between your breath and your mind. If you can breathe and slow your breathing rate down to about between 4 and 6 breaths a minute, then that is a really potent tool when anxiety is at a low level to really sort of manage that and bring your thoughts down. And that kind of goes along with meditation as a long-term strategy. But in the short term, I think breathing really helps when it's at a certain level. If you're having a panic attack and you're trying to breathe it out, it doesn't work. Unfortunately, the energy has to do its own thing and run its course.
I really like what you said in the beginning about expressing the energy. I think that'll help a lot of people, like that your body's naturally having to go through this process, right? If you look at it as, oh no, something's wrong with me, then that'll only increase your worry or anxiety and make matters worse, right, on the whole situation. So I think that I mean is something that people should really let that sink in, because saying it's okay, a panic attack is your body's natural response to release all of this built up or pent up energy, and just sort of let it happen, go with the flow. And just to sum it up, take control through light exercise and breathing. I mean, that's amazing advice, Dave. That I think will help a lot of people, so that they don't feel like they're not in control and something really bad's going to happen to them because they're going through this. This is a response that anyone who has anxiety and panic attacks goes through. And again, that's just going to help people be more a little bit more comfortable to it when it does happen, knowing that it's a normal response.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, when it gets to a high level and you're having panic attacks, then there's an associated fear of the expression, because society is still pretty tight. There's a tight cap on what is acceptable in terms of expression for society. And if you're walking down the street and all of a sudden you have a panic attack, there's a judgment that you're going to have in your own head about how all of these people are looking at you and judging you. And that just makes it even worse, right?
It's a trigger.
and it becomes, then the panic attack itself becomes another trigger, where now you're walking around being afraid that you're going to have a panic attack in front of other people, and that's just going to amplify things. So there's that sort of point where you can get to. But it's just expression of emotion. That's all it is. And here's where I don't like the definitions. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, but when someone loses someone, like say your parent dies and you're grieving, it's naturally acceptable to grieve and to cry, right? We say that's fine, that's okay. We say getting angry to a certain point is okay. Beyond that, we say someone may have anger management problems, but we don't call excessive anger a disease. But somewhere in there, anxiety and depression have been associated with disease. Or, I mean, now they call it mental health instead of mental illness, mental illness, quote unquote. But grief, anger, depression, anxiety, they're all just human emotions. And to take one or two of them and separate them out and say that all of a sudden they're a disease, or you've got an illness, I don't know if I 100% completely agree with that. They can certainly make life very difficult and unmanageable, but I don't know that it's an illness
Mhm.
or a disease from that perspective. Um, so yeah, I think that just goes back to how you label it. And if you think you have a disease or an illness, instead of just saying this is an emotion, I need to learn how to cope with it, have some tools and learn to master it like any other emotion, then
Yeah.
you're approaching it from a different perspective that empowers you rather than disempowers
Yeah, it's similar, I guess, to saying, someone who's overweight, they're obese. It doesn't mean that they're going to be obese forever. Like they could do
you.
things to
Right.
change that. They can lose weight and start exercising more often, start eating healthier, and decreasing their stress, living a less stressful lifestyle or whatever. There's a lot of things you can do to start decreasing your weight. So yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree that, yeah, we like to label things as if they're, which when you do label it, it's almost like, okay, it's out of my control. It will, which would only promote that victim mindset where it's like, oh, I can't do anything about it, instead of, hey, okay, listen, I've let myself go here, I've gained all this weight, I can change this, or I've lost control of my emotional state and I'm getting anxious a lot, or I'm depressed, but it's up to me, I can change this, I can do something about it. I think that's important, it's empowering, right? Whereas,
Yeah.
yeah, if you label it as something that's almost, okay, you have it and then that's it, there's not much you can do to fix it, outside of looking for some type of quick fix, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
really
Oh,
good.
and I guess just maybe to just to tag on to that point a little bit is that, so I mean, if anxiety and depression, anger, grief are all just emotions, the thing is they are what make us human.
Hmm.
There's reasons for them. Usually there's some type of lesson associated that you grow and empower yourself when you overcome and master that emotion. They're necessary part of our growth process. But as soon as you take one emotion and you try and inhibit it,
Hmm.
uh, or suppress it, you can't really do that without suppressing all of the others,
Hmm.
right?
Good point.
And if you suppress one and say this is a problem, then in a way you almost have to take all of them away because then all emotions are problems.
Yeah.
Um, and let's just take a pill or do something to numb ourselves out and not feel anything and
Hmm.
just kind of walking dead our way through the rest of life. So yeah, I think there's just that whole, I mean, I guess we'll talk about it later. There's maybe a role, well, we're talking about supplements and medication and stuff like that. But in
Hmm.
terms of suppressing, I can't agree with that in the long term. I think that's a short term regaining of balance or
Yeah.
equilibrium.
Yes. Yeah. We will talk about that very soon, actually.
Yeah.
Um, the thing I wanted to ask you next, uh, is the yeah. So sorry. What are your thoughts on sharing struggles with others, like family members or friends, and you think it's a good idea or a bad idea? Like you yourself said in the beginning, uh you went into your room and you yelled into your pillow and you dealt with it on your own because you feel like a lone wolf. Yeah, what strategy, is it different for everyone, or yeah, do you think it is helpful to share it with others?
Yeah. So I do think it's helpful for sure. But you've got to pick the right people to share it with. And
Absolutely.
you've got to make sure there's a high degree of trust between you and the other person if you're going to be open and vulnerable to that point. And you've got to make sure the person doesn't have any ulterior motives other than your well-being. Uh,
Hmm.
so I think sharing is good, and I mean I can say definitely I made my process far worse by not sharing.
Hmm.
It could have been a shorter, smoother ride had I had some of these tips and tools ahead of time to be able to cope instead of just trying to figure it out for myself. Um, but yeah, the thing is, people with anxiety, and maybe I don't know if this is in general, but at least more with me, at least when I had anxiety, I didn't really have a lot of self confidence.
Hmm.
Part of the anxiety was was manifesting because of my own lack of belief in myself and my own lack of confidence.
Mhm.
And I guess the risk is someone coming in and telling you everything that you have to do, um, in a way that disempowers you even more.
Mhm.
You want to find someone you can talk to and have a coach for sure, but someone who elevates you, someone who brings you up, who builds your confidence, but also pushes you out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. And when you
That's a
have
fine
anxiety,
balance.
yeah, it's a fine
Yeah.
balance. When you find some, if you get someone, uh, and you're talking to them about it, and let's say you're just afraid to go to the store because of COVID, right? That's a general anxiety that I think a lot of people are going to have. At some point, you have to get back to living your life, and having someone you can share and discuss with. If the person says, "Oh no, that's okay, just stay inside, don't worry about it," therefore you don't have to feel uncomfortable,
Mhm.
you're now submitting to the anxiety. You're
Mhm.
now giving anxiety that power over you. And if you're constantly telling and exposing your worry to someone who is going to do that,
Mhm.
that can actually make things worse. So you do need to make sure that when you're chatting with someone, there is someone who's going to sort of have your interest, but also help you expand your comfort zone there, because that is key to long-term success.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. Um, Now, how about, you know, reaching out to a mental health specialist? What do you feel about that? Like someone who's a psychologist, for instance, what are your thoughts on reaching out for help?
Yeah, I mean, I have. Let me think about how I'm going to word this here. You have to do what feels right,
Hmm.
and it's not my point. It's not my. It's not within me to tell someone you should or should not see a psychologist, or you should or should not see, um, a psychotherapist, or start meditation. You have to find one that resonates with you
Hmm.
and that you feel comfortable with. But
Yeah.
you also have to, as you go along, check it and balance it and make sure that the process is working for you.
Hmm.
So some people, a psychologist might be their way, and that's fine, and that works for them. For me, it was meditation. Was probably the key thing that helped me. And But for some people, it might be psychotherapy. It might be seeing a spiritual counselor. It might be seeing a psychiatrist. But just know, if you're going down the route where someone's going to prescribe you medication,
Hmm.
it is my perspective that that's just a short-term band-aid to help you regain control.
Yes.
In the long run, unless there's some deeper, like, psychological issue that's not anxiety but associated with that, or some other issue, ideally it's my perspective that you want to sort of wean off the medication over time as you learn to develop coping skills and tools and ways to just empower yourself and take control of the anxiety itself, right? So who a person chooses is up to them, who they feel comfortable with. I
Yes.
would never say don't see a psychiatrist or don't see a psychologist. That's Some people are very medically based, and
Hmm.
that's who they trust, and that's their way of seeing the lens through which they see the world, and they will automatically not trust anyone who does meditation. but
Yeah.
also but also vice versa. Some people are so meditation based that they automatically don't trust anyone who's in the medical profession. But
Hmm.
there's a lot of people in the medical profession that are good people and they do want
Yeah.
to help, right? And
Yeah.
so, who you choose is up to you, but you just have to check it and make sure it's working over time for you.
Yeah. You
And
want to try to take the best from both worlds if possible, right? Like if it's a serious situation where you need immediate attention, it's meditation is something that does take time to learn that skill, right? And
right,
whereas if someone was one wrong choice from ending their life or something like that, something drastic, then yeah, and a medication could save them. Yeah, I
right,
definitely think it's, you don't want to rule out any side because they all serve their purpose for, depending on the person's unique situation. Um, yeah, so yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Now, there's a term that I heard. I'm an avid tennis fan, as you know. We often discuss tennis, but uh, a super coach, which was a coach that has been in, the they were a tennis player and they were in, like, championship matches and so forth and so on. And so now they've become a coach for a player. So they call him a super coach, because they've been through it and they won. They actually faced the challenge that, the player is going to be facing today. What are your thoughts on super coaches for mental health? People like you and I who have dealt with, extreme mental health issues and learn to not just overcome and heal from them, but even thrive to the point
Yeah.
where we're helping others. What do you think, people like you and I can bring, having that experience? So, knowing exactly how they feel and knowing the struggle and, knowing at least how a one way that we overcame it. It may not, it's not definitely the only way or the way that's going to work for everyone, but do you think, what do you think we can provide really that maybe someone else who is a professional but hasn't really been through what those people are going through, like we have? Like, what do you think the advantage is there, or do you not think there's an advantage?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. The first one, I think it's the saying is from has is from Taoism, and it's an ounce of practice is worth a ton of theory.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between book smarts and real world experience. And having the theory is always helpful,
Hmm.
but theory without applied experience, I think, leaves a little bit lacking. And I think when you're looking for a coach, or you've you're seeking someone and they've been through it, there's a couple benefits there. One, you can get through it because look, this person has been through it,
Hmm.
right? It provides a light at the end of the tunnel. And when you're in the deepest parts of your anxiety and depression, sometimes that light at the end of the tunnel is not there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And for someone else to be there and say, look, I've been through this, there is a light, it provides that belief, even if it's not happening in the moment, that one day things will get better. So
Hmm.
just being the example, right? I think that's Gandhi, right? Be the example you want to see in the world. Put
Yes.
that out there. The other thing I think is uh, authenticity is just so key. There's a level of authenticity and empathy when someone has been there and done that. And there's all these little tiny day-to-day detail things that you did to cope or manage, or that I did to cope or manage,
Hmm.
that you maybe wouldn't get from book smarts
Yes.
and just reading the theory part of it, right? So I think there's a level of authenticity and sort of just empathy and connection that that person understands, uh, that you've gone what they've gone through, and you really understand what they're going through, right? It's not
Mhm.
just like a computer talking back to you that's just monotone and putting everything down to data, different data
Yeah.
points.
Yeah, it's, like you just said, if you feel completely hopeless, unless you experienced hopelessness to that degree, you don't really understand it. And you
Right.
can read it on paper and say they feel hopeless, and you may think to yourself, yeah, I sort of understand what that feels like from reading it, but yeah, unless you've really truly experienced complete and utter hopelessness, then yeah, it's not the same as, yeah, as like you said, reading about it. No,
Right.
that's great. Those are great points. um yeah, no, I think that you nailed it. You hit the nail on the head there. So um Now, we talked about short-term strategies, your top short-term strategies when you're dealing with a bout of anxiety. Now, I want to talk about long-term strategies. Like, what are some of your top long-term strategies um, to deal with anxiety, more from a, preventative type mindset where you're, I guess, building a foundation, right,
Right?
of health and completely bulletproofing, like we said before, yourself.
Yeah. So, like we just to review quickly, we talked about breathing exercises and physical movement
Hmm.
as short-term
Hmm.
ways to negotiate, but those also keep through into the long term. So whatever I say is just added on to that. So the thing that helped me the most was meditation,
Yes.
without a doubt, for sure. So the way I look at it, as I explained before, is there's a buildup of charge in your body, and if you're in the center, the charge builds up, and the more you get off to a bigger charge, the more you become polarized and
Hmm.
away from the center. And the center, let's just say, is just being calm and relaxed.
Hmm.
And so with meditation, you use the breathing, you use different techniques like body awareness to build awareness of those physical sensations, like, tight muscles, shaking, butterflies in the stomach, difficulty breathing, you know, restlessness at night, waking up in the middle of the night with your heart pounding or whatever. You use meditation to really build a strong foundation of awareness of those symptoms so you can deal with it at the lower level when it's just doubt and hesitation. But it goes more than that, is that a person's state of being can be can be practiced and trained,
Hmm.
right? So if I want to train myself to be calm and relaxed, I can do that through meditation. And
Hmm.
when you're calm and relaxed, anxiety can't exist at that state because it's so far polarized over to being super wound up and super hyped up. Those states of being are at odds with each other. And so using meditation as a foundation to train yourself to be the eye of the tornado, so to speak, right? Everything around you is like going crazy, but you're in the center and you're calm and you're peaceful.
Hmm.
And you use meditation to train yourself into that way. So when you go into different scenarios and situations, you can hold your center and train yourself into a state of being where anxiety, the thing is, I don't want to say it will never exist because, like I said, it's a human emotion. All human
Hmm.
emotions, they either have to be expressed or suppressed, and we want to express, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, uh, the thing is, you learn to stay in your center, and even when you're just a little bit off center, because you build that self-awareness through meditation, so you have the skills and the tools either to breathe or to face the challenge or whatever it is that you need to do. So the anxiety will be there to one degree or another, but you will want to train yourself so you're in, relatively in the center, so you know when you're coming off and you can deal with it and cope with it. The other thing is, which we talked about before, is expanding your comfort zone and facing your fears. And this is going to be tough for a lot of people. I think maybe depending on how intense the anxiety is, you have to negotiate what a person can face. So the foundation is building calm and peace within you and anchoring that in your system. But when you can do that, even before you can do that, but when you can do that, then you have to expand yourself back into life. You
Yeah.
have to start to go out and live life again. And to do that, you have to be able to hold a relative amount of calm and peacefulness moving into situations. And that means you have to start going to the store, even though COVID's going on. Do what you need to do, feel safe. If you need a mask, that's fine. But you have to face your fears at a level that you're comfortable doing it.
Yes.
And doing that, and this is the other practice that comes along with meditation, is present moment practice.
Hmm.
This one really, really helped me a lot. Eckhart Tolle talks about it a lot, and he was a very influential guy in my process. But
Hmm.
When you got anxiety and you're thinking about the future a lot, or things that may happen or could happen, I'm thinking if I go to the store, I'm going to get COVID.
Yes.
That's a future event. Even if it's only an hour from now, it's still a future event. But when you're going through that, you look in the present moment. And even after that, you go to the present moment and where you're at, and you just look around you, and you'll see there's a very large discrepancy between what you are experiencing now and what your mind thinks is going to happen. And you
Hmm.
have to build awareness of this discrepancy, because it's just getting your mind under control.
Hmm.
And then you go to the store a day later, you want to wait 2 weeks until you get until a negative COVID test, then fine. Then in the present moment you can say, look, I did that. I
Yeah.
didn't get COVID. I was safe. I was sound. There was nothing that happened. Doing that starts to diffuse the mind and the
Yeah.
thoughts and the charge that comes with it and all of the things that come along with it. So really, really stepping into the breath and just being aware of what's around you, and learning the discrepancy between that and how your thoughts are just going way out of control and into catastrophes.
Yeah.
As a long-term practice, I think that really helped me a lot in terms of the present moment practice.
I,
uh,
oh, sorry, go on.
Vitality, I think.
Before I
Okay.
like what you
Yeah.
said about meditation. I just want to, uh, uh, express what I feel like you said. What I really liked is how you said you're centering yourself, right? And that's true. That's exactly what you're doing. And it is a practice. You're practicing for real life. It's almost like practicing, uh, you know, a certain skill for a sport, but you have to
Yep.
eventually go out and play the game, right? And in the same way, I feel like what you were saying about the past, the present, and the future, but mostly with anxiety, it's going to the future, is again centering yourself and going into the now. So I just thought that whole thing with meditation and always coming back to the center, or is often said in Chinese philosophy, taking the middle path, right?
Yeah.
Is just staying in the center.
Yeah.
It is very, very important to remember when you're meditating, right? And yeah, no, those were great points on meditation. Sorry, go on. You were going to talk about vitality.
Yeah. So I think this kind of goes along with any type of um, emotional processing, is that I think a person's emotional processing capability uh, depends a lot on their vitality and how healthy they are.
Yeah.
And a person that is very tired, and this is the thing with anxiety, because it can stop you from sleeping. So
Yes.
you get in a cycle where you're not sleeping, and then you're getting tired, and then you're getting more anxiety, and then you're getting more
Yeah.
tired.
Yeah.
It just really weakens you, and it makes you exhausted. And so
Yes.
if your diet is poor, you're not getting any sunshine because you're staying in your bedroom all day or whatever it is. Um, if your vitality is poor, that sets you up for a very difficult road. And so self care, doing the things you need to do to take care of your body and your health, because emotional processing of any kind requires energy. And that
Mhm.
energy comes from you. It can't come from anywhere else. And it comes from the food you eat, the sunshine, the water, and sleeping. And so all of the things that you need to do to self care and take care of your body physically, because the body and the mind have, they affect each other. When one is out, so is the other. So when you do things to keep your vitality as high as you can and as strong as you can, that sets a very strong foundation for having the energy to process what's happening and build upon that. But if you're
Mhm.
weak and you're tired and you're eating sugar all the time, if you're having stimulants like coffee, that can actually cause more anxiety because they're stimulating.
Mhm.
uh, and you're not eating you're going 6 hours in between meals, whatever your nutrition habit and lifestyle habits are, they can really have a strong influence on whether you move through the process easier or just very difficult, right?
Mhm.
So just taking care of your body and your health, self-care, I would make self-care a top priority. And the thing is, this is one of the things that I struggled with, was there's always a constant push from society to make money and work and pay your bills.
Mhm.
And I actually had to consciously step back away from that and choose to work at a reduced rate so I could take care of myself.
Mhm.
And if I was just going to keep working to the same degree, it was never going to get better, or it was just going to be a lot longer. But
Mhm.
uh, I had to then also face the fear of not making enough money to pay bills and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
So whatever you have to do to self-care, and sleep is really, really key here too, right? Especially with anxiety, because of the lack of sleep it can cause. And this is where exercise, I think, comes in, because if I was staying up at night or waking up for a few hours or not going to sleep through most of the night, if I would go for a very long hike or do something that would just burn that energy off, I would be tired enough that I could sleep the next night.
Mhm.
And even though it sucks and you don't feel like doing it, you get in this habit of doing your activity. So you are tired enough to sleep at night. So the anxiety doesn't wake you up. You discharge that energy. So it then doesn't wake you up at 2 or 3 in the morning. So you can actually have your sleep. Sleep is really critical for any mental health issue, right? I mean, you don't
Yes.
sleep, your mental health deteriorates pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, the sleep is really, really key for that, and making that a priority along with your entire self-care regime. But you have to put yourself first. And for
Yes.
some people that can be difficult,
Yeah.
but putting yourself first in this type of situation is absolutely key, because if you can't help yourself here, then you're not really going to be good for helping too many other people in any way, right? So yeah, you got to make yourself a priority. So that uh,
I totally agree with that. I mean, I created V10 Health because I learned early on. I mean, we did a lot of the same schooling as well, private schooling, and often they would show us these vitality charts, and you would see that as a person's vitality went up, the less they had to face symptoms and disease, right? So it was a direct uh, correlation between, vitality, and it was like an inverse relationship between vitality and disease. So yeah, you definitely, as you build up your vitality and you get higher on the V10 scale, the less you're going to have to worry about anything, right? Any of these symptoms. So that's a really really good point, a good approach to healing, and really dealing with the root cause of a lot of these issues.
yeah, I think I'll just add maybe one or two, maybe one other thing is that
Mhm.
in addition to that, there's you have to regulate information input and the environment and how you relate to that. And so
Mhm.
we talked in the beginning about how much fear and trauma is in the news and how much that imprints on people, and like all of that you have to filter out. You've got to learn to establish a strong filter and recognize when you're in your center, you can feel when fear comes at you, and you just got to learn to establish those boundaries, and even just turn off the TV, turn off social media, or just whenever. Not only that, but just being in environments and in situations and being around people
Mhm.
that elevate you and boost you. So you do have to sort of manage your environment a little bit as well. I think that that is key for long-term success until you build the strength to then return
Yes.
to those environments and still be able to hold strong and in your center. And I think in the end, breaking that pattern of avoidance is really key. But um, when you come out the other side of anxiety, the gift is confidence. The
Mhm.
gift is self-belief.
Mhm.
The gift is self-discipline. The gift is, putting yourself first and taking care of yourself. Like there's all these gifts that come at the end of it
Yes,
that
expressing yourself, peace, joy, love, you
exactly,
know,
but you
yeah.
you never see that when you're in it.
Mhm.
But when you go through it, and part of the way of looking at this is a transformation that you're going through. The anxiety
Absolutely.
is there as a launching point for an inner transformation of growth and change that you're going through.
Mhm.
And as you go through the process, there are gifts at the end of it
Hmm.
like we talked about, and you become a new person, you become a better person, you become strong, you believe yourself, you can walk into most situations and just be like, okay, I can handle that. It's not a big deal. Like,
Yes.
things just bounce off you and they don't affect you the way that they used to, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, it helps if you just look at the overall picture as a process of transformation, and that there is reason to it, even if you don't know what the reason is, and there is benefit to it, even if you don't know what that benefit is, but you don't see those until you come out the other side. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, challenges basically are opportunities for growth, right?
right.
And
Yeah,
and the end of that growth are gifts, like you said, special
yeah,
gifts. Yeah,
yeah,
everything that you know, I guess intuitively that are not there, and that like they should be there. Like everybody talks about joy and peace and love and all these amazing, wonderful emotions, and it's like, wow, I'm not really feeling these. Why am I not feeling these? Right? So
right.
you know that as a human being we can all experience these, and if we're not, we're like, well, there's definitely something wrong with me, and I gotta find a way to heal and get to that state where I can enjoy these wonderful gifts that life has to offer, that
Yeah,
being human has to offer.
exactly. Yeah. So
Mhm.
I think there's a line from one of those. I can't remember the movie, but it's Morgan Freeman and what's the guy from The Office? Where he plays God. Morgan Freeman plays God.
Oh, I
First,
know it.
first it was Jim Carrey, and then it was
Yes, it's no, the Noah's Ark one, right? The
yeah, yeah.
where
So yeah,
okay.
Morgan Freeman has a great line in that movie where he says, if you need to develop patience, do you think God is just going to give you patience, or is he going to give you a line and make you wait for an hour? Right?
Exactly. Yes.
Something like that. I don't think that's the exact quote, but to
Yes.
develop those qualities, you have to be tested, and
Yes.
that's part of the test and the challenge, right? Is
Mhm.
going through this, and
Mhm.
that's just how the process works.
Yes. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I think that's it's just like lifting weights. If you want to become stronger and develop a physical body, you're going to have to break through all the resistance that whatever you do, whether it's the bar or the weight you put on the bar, the dumbbells, you're basically overcoming resistance. And the stronger
Right.
you get, if you want to get stronger, that resistance has got to get greater and greater. And it's the same thing, right? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. That resistance equals growth, or challenge equals growth. So don't look at it as it as a negative.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I guess maybe the last thing I have for the long-term bulletproofing,
Hmm.
and again, this is not for everybody.
Hmm.
Everybody's different in how they want to approach this, but we haven't really talked about the spiritual aspect of that yet.
Yes.
And there's a point when you reach your lowest low. And for me, I had anxiety and depression.
Hmm.
It was both. I
Yeah.
would cycle back and forth between
Yeah.
both.
Yes.
Um, when you're at your lowest and you just want to like cut your throat or slice your wrist or take some pills or whatever,
Hmm.
there's a point that you get to where you have to open yourself up to more than just you. And this is where a lot of strength can come from to carry you through the process.
Hmm.
So this is where the spiritual component of it can come in and be of tremendous value. You have to be willing and open to that. In the beginning, I wasn't for a long time. And it's like I had to go through that much suffering to crack my own ego,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
just be like, okay, fine, I surrender.
Yes.
I don't know what to
Absolutely.
do. I'm lost. It's hopeless. I don't know where to go. So I'll just let go, right? You just let go and let God, I guess is the thing, right? And
Mhm.
there's a point when you're at usually your lowest low, which is where, finally your ego breaks and you just start to open up to that,
Yes.
and finding a spiritual source of strength in connection to something that is greater than you,
Hmm.
that is also you or in
Yeah.
you,
Yes.
but is more than just your body, mind, and emotions, right? Your spirit, your soul, or divinity, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
being able to connect with that and surrender to that,
Mhm.
and letting that be the strength for you to
Mhm.
carry you through can
Mhm.
be really, really beneficial, because the thing is, whatever that is so much more immense than whatever your anxiety is. Like
Mhm.
it's like there's no comparison there, and that is just so overwhelmingly loving and strong and compassionate. And if you can tap into that and let that in you and flow through you,
Mhm.
that source of strength really, really keeps you going through the process. But unfortunately for me, that didn't happen until I was at my lowest low.
Same
uh,
here.
yeah,
Same here. That was we'll go through it in part two, but yeah, that was the last straw for me, really the last thing that I tried, and I actually didn't even think it was going to work. It was sort of a desperation,
yeah,
move. And I didn't even, like I said, I didn't even believe it would work, but it made all the difference. Yeah, so definitely an important part, because I feel like a lot of people, and this is regardless of if they're religious or not, because I that's the mistake that I made, was thinking that religion and spirituality were the same thing. Now it could
right.
be for some people, but for me it wasn't. And yeah, anyway, so that was the last part, because I really didn't like dogmatic religion. And I pushed spirituality away because I tied it all in together. And yeah, like I said, it was literally the last stone that I unturned. And fortunately I did, because if that didn't work, I was definitely a goner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, same here.
Right. Yeah, that's how desperate you are. You just, okay, fine. I've tried everything that the ego has told me to try. Now it's time to surrender to something bigger than myself, because I can't figure this out, right? So yeah,
Right.
that is definitely one of the major steps to conscious unity, and integrating spirit into your life, which is uh, definitely a superpower to have,
Right. Yeah.
for just for everything. Which again, we'll talk about it more in part two. Now, there's another stat I wanted to talk to you about, and that is, children from the ages of 13 to 18, they show that 25% of them are basically struggling with anxiety. What would you what would you say to that demographic, being so young?
Right. So I would first say something to the parents,
Hmm.
as large influencers of their kids, for sure. I think, as we talked about before, I think there are maybe are some people that sort of enable the behavior
Hmm.
by saying, "Oh no, don't worry about it. Just don't do that. Avoid that. Just they just sort of try and parents instinctively want to protect their kids, but
Hmm.
sometimes they try and put them in bubble wrap, and that doesn't help." If I can say it bluntly. So for parents, they have to make sure that um, they have to realize sometimes how much their worry imprints on their own kids.
Hmm.
And when you worry about your kids, it's just instinctual and it's natural, and that happens. But that is your worry, not your kids.
Hmm.
And so if you have someone that you're around a lot for 5, 10, 15 years, and you're constantly worrying about that person all the time, just think about what effect that has on that person's, what happens to them and their well-being if they're not strong in their, which kids usually aren't. I mean, some are, but not all are. Most just imprint, the environment imprints upon them. And if you're, since so much of communication is nonverbal, and kids will always pick up on that, you're basically, the message you're sending them is, I don't believe in you, I don't trust you, the worst case scenario is going to happen, you're going to fail. Like, that's what worry is. You're just putting all of that onto your kids. So as a parent, you really have to make sure you negotiate that with yourself, because that's going to have a large influence on how your kid responds and behaves in certain situations.
Yes.
So you've got to instill confidence in them. You've got to tell them you believe in them. You've got
Hmm.
to tell them you know they can handle this. You've got to say be strong. Like, and when they start to get nervous about stuff, you have to be able to push them out of their comfort zone when it's appropriate. And you have to know when it's appropriate and when it's not, obviously, right? It's not every situation, but I think the role of the parent, and there just does seem to be that mentality today of bubble wrapping their kids to try and protect them,
Hmm.
when that just weakens them in the long run.
Yeah, over nurturing instead of
Yeah, yeah,
giving them a bit of nature. Yeah.
yeah. So it's just getting reining in that inherent protective mechanism to a point where it's balanced and correct, as opposed to overdoing it.
Hmm.
Yeah. So for, I don't know, maybe for the kids, maybe you can speak a little bit more on that. Like, what would you say to
Hmm.
your kid? I guess, how old is your son?
He's 12. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So he's right there. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, what would you say to him or
Well,
other kids his age in that situation?
so in my situation, um, because I dealt with mental health and you know uh, overcame it, healed from it, and I've been in the health industry for so long, I realized that it was very important to shape his mind and heart and emotions, everything, like from a very, very early age. So I did exactly what you were saying, right? Built up his confidence, always said, you have an amazing bright light. He's got a really big personality. And I said, I always want you to shine brightly and express yourself, never hold back, right? And things like that, right? So um I think it's more of a long-term approach. It's not something that you're gonna fix or whatever overnight, or look to do, like a lot of parents want to do that. They see their child suffering, like you said, and they want to jump in and help out and try to fix the problem immediately because they don't want them to suffer. But like we talked about before, suffering and challenges, those things are okay. Those things serve a purpose to build a strong character, because once they do get through it, and of course you being there by their side, saying like stuff like you said, believing in them and so forth and so on. Once they do get through it, you got to understand that uh, if it is a process and it's longer and they do get through it, it's not a quick fix, then they're going to be better off for it, and they're going to be able to handle it as the pressures increase with schooling and picking a career and all these other different challenges they're going to face. They're going to be better off for it. So yeah, really thinking of it as a long-term process, not something that you're going to fix immediately. I think that really is the key thing, um, because once you really teach them what we've talked about today, and you want to empower them, really, you want to let them know that they're in control of their emotions, and that don't allow circumstances to throw you off center, right? Teach them about mindfulness, about meditation, about um, uh, how to handle these situations. And it's okay if they become overwhelmed at times, but at least they know, at least they're aware that they're being overwhelmed and losing control. And that's the first step, right? Awareness is really a great thing. Once you realize, like, oh, I don't feel well, I'm completely overwhelmed, I'm off center, right? That knowing that is great. Knowing that uh, you need to work at centering yourself and dealing with these situations better. I think that's the beauty of it. So again, just don't try to fix it right away. It doesn't work that way. Let them go through the long process, and and over time they will bulletproof themselves. There's no With bulletproofing, there's no quick thing to do, right?
Right.
It really is a holistic approach. That's my point. It's making sure they're fed properly, getting all the nutrients, making sure that all their needs are being met, right? And when you do that, they're moving enough. We know how many, like a lot of kids now are in front of screens, right? Whether playing video games or on YouTube or whatever it is. Yeah, so just getting them to move more and socialize more with actual kids instead of, again, in front of screens. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're getting more sunlight, spending more time in nature. Again, a holistic approach will help them deal with anxiety and other issues. Yeah, so really um, that really sums it up, Dave. I think this was a very helpful and enlightening, I'm sure, for a lot of people who are struggling. I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing all this invaluable information. I think you really can help a lot of people. If someone wanted to reach out to you and connect with you and just continue this discussion on a one-on-one basis, how would they do that? And what's the process with your coaching? How does it all work? How do you how do you get started with Dave, for instance, if someone was interested in that?
Yeah, so my website is awakeningenergy.net.
Hmm.
And you can contact me. My email is there on my website, and you can contact me through email. And then after that, it's just a matter of sending me sort of a, a short form or written, type out this little uh, description of your situation and your scenario and what's happening and what's going on, and then just send that to me, and then I can look over and qualify, and then we can get started and get going. But like you said, it's a long-term process. Find the tools in the short term to help regain your equilibrium immediately, but then building that foundation so you're rock solid over the long term.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Well, thanks again, Dave.
Yeah.
Have a
Well,
great day. We'll definitely do this again soon, obviously for part two on depression, and we'll do sort of a role reversal where you
yeah.
ask me questions and I'll be answering, and hopefully even more so in the future. If people found this helpful, leave a comment. Let us know what you think and what you want to hear. Again, Dave and I are very open to discussing, anything to do with health, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. Um, we've faced it all and we've discussed it all. So we want to share what we know with you, and we'd be happy to do so. So yeah, again, just drop us a note. Thanks, Dave. Again, have a great day. We'll touch base very soon, and look forward to doing part two on depression with you.
Cool. Fantastic. Nice chatting with you, Sal.
Bye.